Today on the best of Oklahoma gardening, we are getting ready for spring. Soil and water conservation specialist Jason Warren joins Kim to talk about organic material and nutrition in our soil. OSU Insect Adventure Coordinator Andrina Schufran explains the use and benefits of bee boxes and how to attract native pollinators to the garden. Extension turfgrass specialist Dennis Martin has recommendations on cool season turfgrass mixes. And David Hillock gets our irrigation system started up for the spring. Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance is provided by TLC, Oklahoma's leading garden center, Southwood Landscape and Nursery, Tulsa's source for great gardens, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing.
We're going to take a look at some of the organic materials that we can use in building up our soils. And these are not all created equally, right?
Nope.
Tell me a bit about some of our options.
All right. Well, so like here you've got compost, and it's one of the most common, organic amendments that gardeners would use. The challenge with or the good thing about it is it's rich in nutrients. It's got a good carbon to nitrogen ratio. So when you apply that to the soil, you're going to be ready to go to grow your garden. The challenge is that because it's so high in nutrients, years and years of application cause excessive nutrient loading in the soil, like phosphorus, and we hear about phosphorus and problems that it causes with water quality. So I like to see a limit on this once your soil matures into a nice fertile soil. And that's where, when we get into some of these other materials, they have lower nutrient value per pound of material, and so you'll be much less likely of building that nutrient content too high.
Okay, and one of the lowest is fresh grass clippings.
Fresh grass clippings are fairly good. I mean, they've got, because they're nice and fresh and green, and so they're going to have a pretty good nutrient content. The seed-in ratio of them is about 20:1. So you'll apply these, and it'll take longer to release the nitrogen than it would from compost, but it will release. And you can build some nutrients from that, but at least you're not bringing them in from off-site. Compost, unless you're composting your own leaf clippings and yard waste, you're bringing that in from off-site, whereas this is just being cycled through your yard. Okay. And then the same thing with straw, it's an off-site deal.
Now you use the term C/N ratio, which is carbon to nitrogen. So we're looking at the ratio of carbon and nitrogen that comes out of the material we're adding. Yeah. Just wanted to clarify that for viewers.
Because see, the microbes, this straw or grass, this hay material, it's got a fairly high seed-in ratio, probably about 50 to 60:1, or 50 or 60:1. So that means that it has, say, 60 carbon molecules for every molecule of nitrogen. And when microbes decompose that, they're going to scavenge the nitrogen from your soil and rob it from your plants that you're actually trying to grow, so they won't grow and or they'll be yellowed. So we need to be thoughtful when we use a material like that.
So before we talk about the nitrogen, which is going to be very important, there's one more material, actually two. We're sitting on top of wood chips. Yep. Certainly another material we can use.
And wood chips, that's a great mulch. It's a fairly stable organic material. Because it's hard for the microbes and soil biology to break down, but it will slowly, if you keep it covered with wood chips, that material is adding to the organic condition of the soil as well. The peat moss, and I like peat moss because it's a fairly stable organic matter, meaning that it won't decompose as quickly, and so that's the challenge. organic matter decomposes over time, and we want that because that's going to release nutrients and feed the microbial population. But we want it to be maintained to some extent, and this is a material that's as stable or nearly as stable as the compost with respect to pounds of organic matter applied that will persist over time, but it doesn't have as high nutrient content. So you can apply that without adding a whole large amount of nutrients with it.
Okay,
And
so we won't get that phosphorus buildup and potassium buildup.
But yet it's a fairly stable organic matter material that will build water holding capacity and improve the drainage of clays and things like that. But you have to be thoughtful too, because it will drive your pH down, particularly in a sand. If you've got a heavy clay soil, not so much because it's more buffered. But these are the options. They have pros and cons, but can be used.
Our garden cats decided to join us for this segment. All right, Cowboy. So one thing we want to put, these raw materials are really good to be putting down in the fall.
Yeah.
They'll decompose right into our soils.
Exactly. So, and they take time to decompose and break down and do what you want, but during that fallow period, they'll keep the soil open, right? But the challenge is how that raw material is going to affect your nutrients that you're going to want to go into your garden and plants.
You can see that sometimes a garden that's been mulched, say with grass clippings or leaves, and the plants are struggling because they don't have enough nitrogen, because the nitrogen is being used to decompose that.
Yeah, and so you could put those in just prior to your off season and let them decompose, and that'll kind of stabilize the nutrient condition, versus putting them in the spring and then they'll be decomposing while your plants are trying to grow, and that's kind of a problem, like you say. And so you'd want to use something like a compost in the spring, because that's going to have readily available nutrients in it, and then build your organic matter with the raw material in the fall. Okay,
and we're going to want to follow that up in the springtime with a soil test to make sure that we have adequate nitrogen.
Yep, because that soil test it'll tell you where you're at on your nitrogen concentrations and whether you need to apply supplemental nitrogen.
All right, well, thank you so much, Jason.
Yep.
Andrina, another way we can encourage native pollinators, native bees in the landscape particularly, is to put a bee nest out for them. And this could be something you make yourself, or we have a couple of different commercially available products.
Right, or build your own. They're very simple, straightforward.
And what are the characteristics we're looking for?
On the bee houses, there are several simple holes.
There you go.
That are made out of bamboo on this particular one, that the bees will be able to go in and they'll start laying their eggs at the back. So we have a lot of different sizes, so that'll accommodate both the wood bees, and then the smaller ones will accommodate the mason bees, and there won't be any problem with them together.
Okay.
They're all too busy with their babies.
And this one has smaller openings, and it actually has a removable
This one's
insert.
fabulous.
It's a great nest because you can look inside and see what's going on in there. So why don't you tell me what's happening here?
This one's just getting started. You'll see at the very end that there are some tiny larvae, and that around them the mama bee has come in and she has provisioned pollen so that when the egg hatches and the larvae is ready to feed, that he'll have plenty of food to eat. And she starts at the back and she'll fill it all the way up to the top.
Yeah, like we see here.
And put little divisions between each one.
And this is the mason bee or orchard bee, the ones that are really good for pollinating our fruit crops. And they have a really interesting bit of biology here. So we can see how they're packed in, and obviously the ones at the bottom can't get out.
Right, so she starts at the back, she puts in an egg, she puts in a carrier, she puts in another egg, and all the way to the top she seals it all off.
You can see
they're all sealed off, and then she'll go away and do another one someplace else. They feed, they pupate, and then when it's time to hatch out, miraculously somehow the bees know best, and the one at the top closest to the front will hatch out first, rather than the one at the back maturing first. The one near the entrance matures first.
Even though that one was laid first.
Even though
That's
it
just
was
really
laid
remarkable.
first. Biology.
And the other thing is that the females tend to be at the back. which, you know, they're really crucial to reproduction. And so,
right, and the males emerge first, so they'll kind of wait around for the females, and then the females emerge, and they usually mate very quickly.
And this is a great box just because it has the clear tubes. They don't have to be clear,
Yes.
but it allows you to see what's going on inside of there.
And you have it set up facing perfectly, where it's got a little bit of shade to protect them in the afternoon, and it's facing towards the southeast. So you get early sun to warm the box after a cold night, but you're not facing directly south or west into the burning heat of the afternoon.
And we also want to place these, elevate them off the ground, including, you know, this one I could hang from a tree or something.
Yes, hang it near the trunk of a tree so that it's not out flopping around too much, but it'll be stabilized in the crotch of a tree is another place you can wedge these in.
Okay.
They have their own rain shelter built in, so as long as they're protected from being battered around, you can put them in your trees or up high on stilts.
Okay, and we want to shoot for about 3 to 5 feet off the ground.
3 to 5 feet. It's common to want to put them on the ground, especially when you make your own by drilling, but they need to be up high.
Well, we've been looking at some of our native bees, and actually there's so many different native pollinators. What can we do to encourage them to visit our garden?
Few simple steps. Plant lots of flowers, both host plants for the feeding of the larvae as well as the flowers for feeding the nectar on the pollinators. So plant lots of flowers. Plant a diversity of flowers, just one kind. Some other pollinators are very specific on the families of plants that they live on. So diversity of plants, and then if possible, plant as many native flowering plants as you can.
And I like to encourage people to incorporate flowers into all areas of the garden. So the vegetable garden, a lot of times around the house where people just have a bunch of evergreens, get the flowers in there because that's going to bring so many beneficial insects into the landscape.
And the ones around your garden will actually then be active on your squash, your tomatoes, your peppers, and really increase the crop.
Excellent. Now, the other thing, once we have all these insects, what should we do to protect them and keep them safe?
Sure. It helps to just kind of keep an awareness that they're there. They need water. They're animals just like us. So if you can provide a bird bath, then they'll all drink as well as the birds. And then if you can be very specific and very limited about the pesticides that you use. Instead of just using a broad spectrum pesticide that's going to kill everything, you'd be surprised when you stop using pesticides and give it a couple of years to balance out how nature will really keep everything in control herself. Sterilizing a scene really causes a lot more problems.
A lot of disruption.
Yeah, don't forget your hands. Your kids in the garden and your dogs and your own fingers can be some of the best control methods for your garden.
Absolutely. Now there's a wonderful resource put together by the Xerxes Society. Well, first of all, their website is a wealth of information on pollination, and they also have a great book.
Yes, a recent book that's just come out full of lots of good new science, and the book is called Attracting Native Pollinators. It's a good thick book, lots of beautiful images, so you'll know the species, you'll know the different methods, and so you'll be able to tell your bad bugs from your good bugs. Just learning the difference can really help your garden flourish.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Andrina.
Thanks for having me.
Because of the poor shade tolerance of Bermuda grass, many Oklahomans turn to cool season perennial grasses for use in light and medium shades. The cool season perennial grasses that are best adapted are tall fescue, turf type tall fescues that is, and also Kentucky bluegrass. We suggest a mix of the two species in order to get a broader genetic base for better resistance to diseases that these grasses might face. Rather than talk about individual varieties, we'd like to talk about proper mixing concepts. The Cooperative Extension Service suggests the use of a tall fescue at 80 to 95% by weight and the Kentucky bluegrasses at 5 to 20% by weight in the mix. While perennial ryegrass can be used in some mixes, we generally don't recommend it because it doesn't persist as well as either Kentucky bluegrass, or tall fescues. Also, we don't suggest these being used in full sun in most areas because of their higher water use rates. Within tall fescues, try to pick 2 to 3 improved modern varieties and at least one Kentucky bluegrass that has improved resistance to summer patch. We suggest that Oklahomans look at the National Turf Evaluation Program, or NTEP, website to see what varieties have performed best in Oklahoma. From year to year, varieties change, and even our seed sales folks within the state don't control the marketplace. It's the market in the Pacific Northwest and what's available in the marketplace that controls actually what goes on shelves. An important point concerning tall fescue is if you want turf type quality, choose turf type tall fescues. There are turf type and then there are forage type tall fescues. Turf type tall fescues are bred for improved density, a lower, more compact growth habit, and darker greener color, which is what the consumer wants in a lawn. The forage type tall fescues are very large and robust and coarse in textured and more lighter green because the grazing animal actually doesn't care what color the material is as long as it's nutritious from a forage standpoint. It's true that you can find the forage fescues at a much lower price, so don't allow price to be your sole factor that influences your choice. You want to choose a good variety that stays in place for many years. Concerning timing of seeding cool season grasses, the fall is actually best. Once we get a break in temperature, usually some point in late September or early October, it's time to seed the tall fescues and the Kentucky bluegrasses. Concerning the spring, while it's an exciting time to get out and garden and seed the lawn, it is a second choice, but in some cases we know folks must thicken up the lawn, and so it's understandable that a spring seeding may be needed. If you're going to seed in spring, try to get the material out in by April 15th to April 30th. In some years with a cold spring, it's possible to seed into May, but what happens with spring seedings is they oftentimes don't reach the maturity level that they need to make it through the summer, and so you have a loss of the stand in summer. In those cases, you simply come back in the fall and try to thicken up the stand with a half rate. Concerning the seeding rates, typically with tall fescue we're looking at 4 to 8 pounds per thousand. You'll use the upper end rates if you're working with a coated seed. If it's not coated, then you'll be looking more towards the 4 to 5 pound per thousand square foot range. You'll want to keep the soil moist for at least a month and then transition the grass into more deep and frequent watering. Both the cool season grasses, tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass, do require irrigation throughout the summer. They are not a carefree grass, but they can lend themselves to giving you good vegetative cover in the shade. So think about use of tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass to give us good turf grass cover.
Hello, today I want to share with you some startup tips for your irrigation system to get it ready for the growing season. Many people will turn their systems off and actually drain them for the winter months so that there's no freezing in the pipes. If they've been installed properly and cared for properly, if the lines are below the frost line or freeze line in Oklahoma, then some people leave them on and don't worry about them too much. But as you begin to turn on your system for the season, especially if you've had the main water turned off, you want to make sure that as you turn that main water valve on that goes to your main lines to your irrigation system, that you do it slowly and allow the water to slowly fill up those lines. If you turn it on real quick, you'll get what we call water hammer, which will cause a lot of pressure down at the end of the lines, and you'll probably get some bursting or breaking of pipes or fittings, and then you got some real major problems in fixing that you have to do. So make sure that you turn it on slowly. Now, one of the first things you also want to check, maybe even before you probably turn on the main water, is your backflow prevention device, and this is required on all systems. And ours is right here. Actually, we have a large irrigation system out here, so this is a pretty good sized one, but you can see that it's well insulated. So we have a nice insulation blanket on it, and it's been on all winter. So here's our backflow prevention device, and it's been well protected. It looks like one of the filters here is kind of popped out, But that's the first thing you want to check. And if it's been taken apart and uninstalled last fall, then that will be the first thing you'll put back on, and then slowly turn on that system to make sure there's no leaks. If it's been in place all winter, again, you want to make sure you check it carefully. Make sure that there are that's working properly and you don't have any major leaks. After you turn your main water line on and you're sure that it's all in good order, then you'll just want to do a walk-through inspection of your landscape. We have in these beds drip irrigation, and then in the turf areas we have some pop-up spray heads. And sometimes it's going to be a little bit difficult just to see what the problems are just by walking through, but that's a good place to start. Eventually you'll have to turn the systems on and check it while it's running. But immediately I have found a problem already here on this line. It's been broken. It has a fitting, a T-fitting that's been broken off in the ground. And so we're going to have to clean this up, probably turn it on to flush the dirt out of the pipes and replace this T-fitting. So then we'll walk through and just continue to look for heads. Like I say, we know there's lots of heads in this area here, but they're kind of hidden by the turf. And so we'll have to, we might be able to figure out where they are. I know there's one right here, covered up by leaves. But one of the things you'll want to inspect is make sure that they're not the heads aren't broken, that they are popping up properly and still straight up and down, vertical, and then as we turn it on, we're going to check to make sure the pattern, the spray is working properly too, so that you're getting all the coverage that you need. So the best way to do that, really, once you get your system turned on, is to go ahead and turn it on manually. So, a screwdriver is very helpful, popping these open, but we'll just pop this valve box open. One of the things you're going to want to look for is you go into your valve boxes, make sure all the wiring's still in good shape, and also make sure there's no nests inside here. Sometimes we get snakes and rats and other things in here. But this is your control valve here, your valve to one line, and this is the main valve that shuts it on and off. But this little nut right here, or screw on the top, that's how you would turn it on manually. So I would just prop that open, just crack it open a little bit. You can hear the water coming on, and we have our heads popping up over here. So here we have a zone that the heads are popped up. Now I'm going to go ahead and walk around and look at the heads, make sure they're watering properly or positioned properly. And another thing I have some little flags because once you turn it back off and they pop back down, again, they kind of disappear in the turf. So I can actually mark these heads too, so I know where they are when I turn it back off, if I have to go back and make some adjustments or fix them. This one we can see right off is actually leaning this way, and so the spray is shooting down into the ground. It's not getting the full coverage or shooting from head to head like we want it to. So this one we're going to have to come back, dig next to the sprinkler head, and position that so it's shooting straight back up. So we'll come back and check that one here, or fix that one here in a minute. The rest of them look like they're doing pretty good. This one here, it's actually, we have it set to shoot at, or it's supposed to be shooting at a quarter angle, and it's actually about half that. This particular head has an adjustment on it. We can just turn the top of it and open up that spray. So now it's shooting from head to head, and we're getting the coverage that we need. There's also a screw here on the top in the middle, and that helps adjust how far the spray will go. So if it's not shooting as far as it needs to, you may need to open that up to allow more water to come out and go further. Or vice versa, if it's going too far, you can close it off a little bit. But the goal is to get head-to-head adjustments on this, or distances on the spray heads. Now, if you find that some of your heads are plugged up and they're not shooting out properly, you can easily get into them and pull them apart and clean them out. This one was on really tight, and so I needed a pair of pliers, some channel locks to get it open. But be careful as you do this, because this is all plastic, so you don't want to break it. But we got this one loosened up already, so you can see what it looks like inside. This one has a spring on it, and this is the riser that pops up. And if you twist off the tip, the emitter here, you will see that there's typically going to be a filter in here, and it's a little dirty, but it's not too bad. I can actually see daylight through it. But usually that's the first place you'll look. Make sure that there's not a large debris in here, particles of sand and whatnot. You'll flush that out, clean that up real good. And then you'll also want to double check the head itself. You can flush that out, blow on it, try to clean that out, make sure that's all nice and clean, and then just put it all back together again. Be sure to check your controller. Make sure that there's power, that it is functioning normally, and that the day and time are correct, and that the stations are set for proper run times this spring. If you don't already have a rain sensor on your system, now would be a good time to install one. Having a rain sensor can keep you from watering when it is not needed, saving a mess and money. And finally, it is a good idea to replace backup batteries in your controllers at this time.
Next week is our first new episode for 2015. We'll be starting up herb seeds, potting vegetable seedlings. Kim will explain how plants respond to pruning cuts. And we'll spring clean our birdhouses. It's getting that time of year for more TV you'll grow to love. For additional information, show notes, plant lists, recipes, and fact sheets, visit our website or contact your local Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service office. Segments from this episode, along with hundreds more from previous episodes, are available on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Oklahoma Gardening. Be sure to join our Facebook group for information on upcoming episodes and gardening events, photos, and discussions of gardening topics. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens. This outdoor television studio is made possible with the help of our generous underwriters, TLC Garden Centers, Southwood Landscape and Nursery, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society.